Right, and for the final interview of this documentary, I'm here this afternoon with Adrian Daniels, an incredible person with many talents and many experiences, but I don't want to give the spoilers away. I will let him get into it. So before I do anything, Adrian, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm chilling. How are you?
Awesome. Listen, I love Ghana. I love your country, Ghana Ma. Like, I love this place. No, I'm good. I'm leaving end of the week, but no, I've honestly had a great time. So,
End of the week.
yeah, end of the week.
Man.
I might extend, but we'll see.
Fingers
But no,
crossed.
honestly, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
So, Adrian, before we really get into things, into your story, who you are, and just the wisdoms that you have to share that lend to this documentary about why Ghana is the way it is and the power that it possesses.
Yeah.
Who is Adrian Daniels? In as few words as
man.
possible, who would you say Adrian Daniels is, and what do you do, in a nutshell?
Adrian Daniels he's just a tech loving, digital loving, just friendly, goofy kind of guy. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I'm just me.
It's just you.
I'm just me.
No,
Yeah.
but it says on the tin, literally doing what you say on the tin. I love that.
Mhm.
I love that realism about you. So like me, you're a black Brit, so you based in the UK,
Yeah.
in Ghana for your own purposes, which we'll come into throughout this interview. But what was your first experience of Ghana then? Was it maybe a trip when you came as a child, or was it in your later adult years, curiosity? When did that first experience of Ghana come for you?
So probably my first experience in Ghana is probably maybe the first year I was born, but obviously I have no memory of what that was. So
Yeah.
my first my first memory of coming to Ghana was I think the year 2000, Christmas. So my first trip was experiencing Ghana in Christmas, and even back then it was still quite fun. There wasn't obviously it wasn't as developed as it is today, but it was still quite vibrant. It was quite lovely, quite lively. Sorry, like there was sort of parties going on, and good food and music, and I don't really remember a lot of traffic, but but yeah, I mean Ghana still had it. Ghana
Yeah.
still had an identity, still had that culture that you could relate to. With the food, with its Independence Square, all these different things. But obviously it's evolved a lot since today.
Okay, so if we fast forward your story a little bit, we've gone from 2000 where you've had your first initial exposure and you've spoken about the nightlife, the food, the culture, the people. And these are things that I keep hearing throughout this documentary of anyone that I speak to. People love Ghanaians. The culture is rich and it's there.
Yeah.
So as you start going through, let's say, adolescence or in your early adult years, so to
Yeah.
say, what were sort of the key moments where you realized or you thought to yourself, Ghana, okay, I don't live there, but this is home, or I want to try and really sow my roots deeper, and I want to have more of a vested interest there. What were those sort of key events that happened for you that made you want to do more things here?
Do more things here, or what wanted to make me live here?
Oh, both. I mean, you can take that
Okay.
either way, whichever
Okay.
came first.
Okay.
Let's take it from there.
Okay, I think in terms of wanting to live here, I think it was just that first trip. Coming with my family, Christmas year 2000. This was a long time ago. Like my dad
Yeah.
was still constructing his house. I
Mhm.
was still living in a house that's still being built. But yet, I was still able to kind of like go around, go to all of these like parties, gatherings, and food parties, all these kind of things, and experience and feel and taste and smell Ghana. But also in terms of this being a place where I potentially wanted to kind of like live and maybe do things here, I think I'll probably reflect back to a conversation I had with my dad, just being in a car, and I remember being in a car with him, and he would always used to say, look, Adrian, look, as a diaspora, as someone who's had the opportunity to live in the UK, there's people who live in Ghana who don't have the opportunity to study abroad or to, have access to what the West can offer. So, one day, you should definitely think about, living here permanently and, giving back with your gifts, your talents, your skills and experiences that you picked up, from the West and help to build Ghana. So that's something that always stuck with me over the years. Even back then when I didn't really want to kind of stay in Ghana, as soon as I finished school, I was out kind of thing. I wanted to go back to the UK. I felt like I was missing out because Ghana wasn't as developed as it is today. The internet is more on par with the West, real estate more on par in the West, shopping malls, etc. All of these amenities, all of these things that we have access to today that we probably didn't really have access to in the UK, as Ghana was still catching up. So I'll definitely say it was definitely those two things. my dad, giving me that word, and him, being like a lawyer, him that's reads tons of books. If you go to his office, like he's got Kwame Nkrumah, Barack Obama, Karl Marx. He's got all of these authors these very strong cultural figures, thought leaders who probably shaped his thoughts and his character today. So probably I would say is my father, and also I would say it's that first Christmas 2000 in Ghana. Yeah. So to those who come to Ghana to party and stuff, and now saying Ghana's lit. Even since 2000, I've been coming in. I've been saying it's been lit.
You heard it here from the man first. But you know what I loved about your response just then was you really spoke to the ideologies that you've been exposed to, like the elements of Pan-Africanism that your dad instilled in you. From what it sounds like for me, the idea of those key political thinkers, and again, it really is a mentality. The idea of lend your abilities and skills back to where you're from, and really helping to counteract the effects of the brain drain. That is a phenomenon across Africa, the best leaving and not coming back, and really working on that. And that is a nice segue actually onto sort of what you're actually up to right now in Ghana, how you're using your skills. So there are two things I want to zone into, and we'll take this depending on how much you want to speak about them. But you have a really, really, really cool podcast called The Sounds of Accra. And you're also doing great work with Africa Global Radio. So I really would love for you to sort of break down those two ventures that you're involved in as much or as little detail as possible, and speak about sort of how you got involved in those, what inspired you to want to get into those, and how those have helped you to sort of progress in your personal goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the Sound of Accra podcast was like a random brainwave that I had one day. Back in the day when I used to be in university, I used to have my own radio show called In the Mix. So it was like an R&B and hip hop radio show. I used to have interviews. I used to have guests on there. I used to have, live phone calls, etc. All of that above. And I also used to take part in running a radio station as well. So for me, like the Sound of Accra and maybe Africa Global Radio is a bit like that, but in the present day. In terms of the Sound of Accra, so one day I had a random brainwave. I'll say in maybe like mid 2019, and really it came from the back of doing networking events in Accra. So I used to do like very small networking events in Accra called Diaspora Connect. So I ran one in 2018, and then I ran another one in 2019. First one, hardly anybody turned up, just friends, like 5 people turned up. The second one I did, 25 people turned up, so it was a big improvement, but still not like stadium filling numbers. I'm not like I don't know, Jay-Z or someone like that's filling out the stadium. So basically on the back of that experience, it was like, I want to keep the networking experience going. My best friend, Toby, he basically always used to tell me, Adrian, like, you were good on radio, why don't you go back into it? So I thought, not really much money in radio. I don't know if it's something I want to do as a career, maybe like a side hobby, but we'll see. So when I put those two things together, I was like, wait a minute. When I looked at YouTube, there's so many people like doing like content for anything to do with Ghana. You type in the keyword Ghana, even the YouTubers are trying to they're trying to hammer in the keyword Ghana in the title, and I'm like, what is this? What is this? Understand? So I was like, wait a minute. In the podcast space, because my background also is I went to Keele University. I've got a degree in music technology and business management. I used to produce music. I've won awards and things like that. I used to rap, all these kind of things. So for me, I've got this background of audio production, working on audio sound. You understand? So I thought, you know what? How about I start a podcast? Like when I looked in the podcast market, right? It's really about everyone's got a voice in the podcast landscape, and I realized, wait a minute, there's actually no podcast that actually represents Ghanaian entrepreneurs and creatives. Why don't I just be that person that just fills in that gaps and just really just runs home with it? So I decided to start the podcast. So I started in January 2020, just before the COVID and pandemic started. And yeah, I mean, I started in Airport Residential, Accra, and here we are 2 years later. You understand? In Accra.
If I can interject there very quickly, sorry. In terms of you building that network of people that you're interviewing or connecting with on that level, coming from the UK, was the Ghanaian community quite inviting, or was it quite a struggle to actually build a name for yourself and get the respect of the Ghanaians that you were interacting with and really working your way into those rooms? How did you find that initial experience?
So I think it was So you're talking about the podcast, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, the
talking about the
podcast.
networking event, the podcast.
A podcast, or really more general experiences, but we can look at the podcast. But just
Okay.
the idea of you integrating into Ghanaian society and those that you were meeting and then interviewing.
Okay.
Was that initial transition quite difficult? Like, we met with a lot of not difficulty or resistance, but was it a challenge, or were people quite open-armed and said, hey, like, actually, we like what you're doing, come on in? How did you find
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think I've been quite privileged to not really have any kind of barriers
Good.
to entry, no real issues.
Okay.
This is something that I would never forget. So on my way to doing the first ever podcast, I was like, I need a hook. Right? I need a hook for people to want to tune into the podcast. And as a result, I randomly came up with something in an Uber. You know, we chat with colourful creators and entrepreneurs from a Ghanaian background and interest. And when I recorded the first episode, of course, that's how I opened up the podcast pretty much. And so basically, I'm already integrated in some Ghanaian communities.
Okay.
One is called Young Ghanaian Professionals UK.
Okay.
So it's like a Ghanaian British community with age ranges between 21 to 40, I
Right.
believe. And so I'm like one of the founding members of it, and like it's grown to about maybe 400 people. We have a WhatsApp group, right? So
Okay.
I put the podcast in there, and then one person responded saying, the first few seconds of the podcast is the reason why I continue to listen to the rest of the episode, because of that hook. That's what. So I
Wow.
realized that, okay, this is something that people wanted. You could say that I'm testing the
Okay.
market
Yeah.
to see if people want that particular type of content, and people want it. You know, I can give you so many stories of fast forward in terms of how it's touched people around the world, and even some of the guests that have come on the show, like some really crazy stories.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we take a step back there, you know, you've really spoken about the importance of the diaspora links, and you spoke about those affinity groups in the UK, the Young Professionals Network, this,
Yeah.
that, and the third. How important would you say that they have been then in your sort of journey? Because hearing that, I didn't even know that some of those groups existed, but they do. So for those watching, how critical would you say they are for somebody who wants to do what you're doing, for example?
Yeah.
And just building off that as well, this idea of Ghana being an entry point to Africa, would you say a big part of that is because of how strong the link is between Ghana and, you know, other countries in the diaspora, would you say, the communities?
So in terms of like Ghana being like friendly to the
Yeah.
world, or like
And just
kind of-
welcoming and having that
welcoming stuff. I
Mm.
think obviously it comes down to a few factors. So of course, you know, Africa has different languages.
Mhm.
Of course, Ghana is obviously one of the few African countries which they speak English, and you know, obviously the local language as well. The political climate is quite, you know, steady. You know, I went to Nigeria in 2019, and
Okay.
I experienced lockdown before lockdown happened. I was in lockdown in Victoria Island, and there was basically like a election, something happening, and my friend said, we're going to stay in your Airbnb all day, otherwise we could step out the house and get killed. You understand?
Right.
So Ghana, political stability is there. The currency, like you know how, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you've ever, okay, you probably haven't come, but in the past, like Ghana money used to be different, but now they've changed it, so it's a lot more easier to do
Was
business
it the old
with.
city versus the new city?
The old city,
Yeah,
that's it, yeah, the old
yeah.
city versus new city. So
Yeah.
like in terms of like the money is like more friendly to do business with and things
Mhm.
like that. You understand?
Yes.
So these are some of the factors which kind of like open, you know, make Ghana seem welcoming. And also another big thing I'll say is that Ghanaians themselves are warm, they're friendly, they're welcoming. You could basically come to Ghana as a tourist and not really be scared. Whereas with sometimes, I'm not
Yes.
having to go to Nigeria, but sometimes with
Yeah.
Nigeria, like you need someone to kind of
Yes.
escort you and
Yes.
help you to like navigate the whole country. You understand?
Yeah.
You can't just go to Nigeria. Like usually you need someone with you, because some parts can be pretty rough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say that in terms of entering Ghana, like yeah, Ghana's a very warm, welcoming place. You know, when I was in Nigeria, there was like a sense of hostility, but there are beautiful, wonderful Nigerians out there. But sometimes you do get a sense of hostility. But when you come to when I came to Ghana later that year, I noticed a complete like difference. Like already, the sense of warmness. People are happy, whether they got a lot of money or not. Yeah, you know, whether it's street hawkers, whether it's people selling pure water, selling PK chewing gum, whether it's people in the shops, whatever. That's Ghana, and I think that also kind of comes back to the podcast. Is that one thing I ask my guests that come on my show is, what's the sound of Accra to you? Like, what thoughts, feelings, vibes come to mind when you mention the word Accra? People will say traffic. People will say plantain chips. People will say all these different things, but these are all memories and emotions that invoke like happiness. You understand?
Yeah. Awesome. No, I think you've really hit the nail on the head about the importance of Ghanaian culture and how that's helped you and potentially others to come back. And I think that thing of political stability, like I'm from Uganda and we had our elections this year. This isn't a political discussion, but it's definitely something you have to bear in mind in terms of where you want to go, where you want to visit, and where your entry point to Africa is going to be. And everyone I've spoken to, the general reception is that Ghana is a fun and friendly place to visit and they feel safe. And I think that has to be the starting point. Yeah. Now, before we wrap this interview, I'd love for you to touch a bit more on your work and experience with Africa Global Radio, because that sounds very, very cool. So are you able to shed some light on sort of what that is as an entity and sort of your role or responsibility within that?
Okay, so Africa Global Radio is an online radio station. It's also an in-house creative media production house as well. Okay. So they're kind of like 2-in-1 in a sense. So it's been going for a little while. So I had a interaction with the founder of Africa Global Radio, and basically we're both in the same podcast community, and I've been running these monthly podcast meetups, etc. And we had a few conversations and discussions before I came to Ghana, and we just decided, look, we're both on the same kind of mission. Let's kind of like meet up and work together. And so basically I'm working together with Africa Global Radio, and really there's a lot of synergy in terms of what we want to achieve. For example, they want to push the positive narrative of Africa towards the whole world, which is great. Not the whole world, but I mean, that is their job, to the whole world. What am I talking about? But I want to also like push the narrative of global Ghanaian excellence to the world. So we're on a similar mission, but also we want to go a step further. So, for example, I want to speak to the Apples, the Spotifys, the Googles, and set up podcast hubs around Ghana, around Africa. I want to be able to use podcasting, put it on a map for Africa. Especially when you look at people that don't have a lot of money, but everybody has a phone. You will see someone selling pure water, but they have an iPhone in their pocket. Maybe, who knows? You understand? So if you have a device that you can use for podcasting, you understand? Why not you be able to use that as a voice to air out your story, your opinion, but also make money from it? And I think that could solve a lot of problems. So these are some of the visions that I have for podcasting in general, not even just the Sound of Accra. And over the time of doing the podcast, I've realized that this is bigger than me. I could tell you other stories. This is bigger than me. I mean, let me tell you this story, season 2, real quick. So I was looking for a season 2 finale guest, and I had someone fill in a contact form, and I received this email from someone in LA. His name's Kevin Brereton, 5 times world champion kickboxer, Hollywood actor, author, whatever, artist. He said, Adrian, hey, my name's Kevin. I was born in England, but I was raised in America. My mum's British, but my dad's Ghanaian. I couldn't find my dad. I could never find my dad. I tried to find my dad, but I couldn't. I stumbled upon your podcast. I love it, and I want to come on your podcast and tell my story. Wow. And he was releasing a new book around the same time as well. Okay. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than
100%. No, honestly. Thank you for sharing that that story with me. And
pleasure.
You've given so many snapshots into the future, so I think it's only fitting I end this interview on this question. Where do you see Ghana in the next 50 years? Because you've spoken about how it's transforming, how it's such an accessible environment, and the amazing things that you're doing and the potential that it has to really be this global player. And it's fulfilling that potential as we speak, even despite COVID and all of these things. The momentum is still continuing pushing forward. So my final question to you is, where do you see Ghana in 50 years? What does Ghana in 50 years look like to you?
50 years, man. Wow, it's quite a question. The way everything is moving at an accelerated rate, it's hard to pinpoint. But what I would say is that it could be, you watch Black Panther?
Yes.
It could be a different version of
Wakanda.
Yeah. It could be a different version of Wakanda.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their tech, their culture. Everyone's happy, they're lively. They got their own thing going on.
Yeah.
You understand? There's a king, there's a queen, whatever it is. But still, but rather than being maybe not locked off to the world, maybe Ghana is more present all over the world than ever before.
I already see that in just how Ghanaian and Nigerian culture, for example, they're quite like especially in the UK, for example, you feel the presence. So I definitely see that extending more as time goes on. So I definitely think you've hit the nail on the head on that. And no, honestly,
calculated guess.
calculated guess, but we'll check back in 50 years and see how right you were in saying that. But I think you've ticked some serious boxes on that.
Yeah.
But no, with that being said, that wraps up this interview. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon and those amazing perspectives and insights into your life, your journey, and just advice out there for the diasporians that maybe want to do things here and wisdoms that you've shared with us. It's really appreciated. So all the best and thank you very much.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Cheers. Thank you.